Hi guys, Aceface back for another video for Twisted Dice, and I'm back with some more Tyranid content for you. Surprise, surprise. But we've got something a little bit back to basics, hopefully something that is going to help a lot of both returning Tyranid players, new Tyranid players, and people that just want to brush up on a bit of tactics and a few bits and pieces. So hopefully this will be useful for lots of people. If you do like the content, please do give us a big thumbs up and a like, and please do hit that subscribe button. We're very, very close to our 10,000 subscribers, and we've got one of the biggest giveaways ever. With all the details will be in the description below, so jump over and click that to find out all about how to win some incredible stuff. But anyway, all the rest of the other links and stuff are down below. But I know you guys are bored of me sell. So today what I wanted to do was really go back to basics and look at the Tyranid Codex. So I'm going to do a series of videos. This will be part one today, and I'll drop one a week for the next few weeks. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to literally go through the Codex. Obviously we're in 9th edition now, and a lot of things have changed, and the synergy of things are very different. The way that the game plays is very different, so that very much changes the units. But also I'm going to give you my opinion on the units. We won't go into huge detail on each individual data slate, but what we will do is just talk a little bit about the ways you can use those type of units effectively, what type of lists they fit into, what I like, what I don't like about them. We'll also reference the Blood of Baal book as well, give you an idea of where there's potentially some synergies there. So that's kind of how we're going to kind of break this down. And as I said, hopefully it's something that you're going to find useful. Right, okay, so we're going to start off pretty much at the beginning, and I'm going to go through the units to start off with. At the end, in the final video, we'll talk a little bit about the Hive fleets, so if you do want to know more about those, then stay tuned for that video coming soon. But today what we're going to do is we're going to cover the HQs, and we are going to cover the troops choices, so hopefully that will be useful to you guys. So starting off, the very first data slate, but first entry we have is the Broodlord. The Broodlord has kind of been on an up and down journey through the last kind of couple of editions. Was very, very good, then was quite overlooked. Points have been kind of up and down, and now in 9th edition he's in quite a good place. It's a very, very fast unit. It's a unit that can deliver a lot of pain, so it's actually quite a good introduction into most lists. If you're an aggressive player, if you like combat, this guy's your man. He's you know, a lot of people will overlook him for one of the other cheap HQs that we'll talk about slightly down the road, but he's very, very good. He hits like an absolute ton of bricks, so works extremely well in that, and he's a great counter-attack unit. He's a great unit that can sit behind and then really rocket forward when you want him to. He's quite small, so he can kind of jump into those little gaps. Really, really effective unit. Obviously you can buff him with some of the both Hive fleets, making him even quicker in a Kraken detachment, allowing him to kind of come away from combat, recharge. You know, he's obviously got the Gene Stealer keyword. He's an effective beast, and definitely a very, very solid unit. One to definitely consider in your lists. The next is probably one of my favourites. I've got absolutely thousands of these guys, and that is the Hive Tyrant. Now the Hive Tyrant is very much your Swiss Army knife. This guy can do pretty much anything you want him to do. If you put him on the ground and don't have wings, he's actually relatively cheap, and you can kit him out and get quite a lot out of him, or otherwise you can stick wings on him. You can make him a lot more expensive, but you can give yourself quite a lot of mobility. He's obviously got the extra buff of having 2 psychic powers that he can cast a turn. That's super, super strong. Gives him the edge over the Broodlord in that way, because the Broodlord only has the ability to have 1. But what the Tyrant does mean is the Tyrant is going to be targeted by pretty much anything, because he is above the 10 wound threshold, unlike the Broodlord, who as long as you play him clever, will be hard to be targeted. The nice thing about the Tyrant, though, particularly if you have him on foot, is he's actually a very small model in today's kind of averages, I suppose. So he's very easy to hide on foot, not difficult at all. He can quite easily kind of fit behind things, and particularly in 9th edition, he's going to be obscured a lot of the time. So he's really good from that point of view. He's also quite good for blocking other characters, because he is above the 10 wound threshold. But lots of different options. You can make this guy very, very shooty. I quite like the heavy venom cannon. I find that an extremely good option. But you can also go super Dakka and have the 2 sets of Devourers, the old classic Dakka Tyrant. Very effective for so long. Now, these days, with them only being 1 damage, no AP, so many things with 2 wounds, they're not so good, but they can still be useful at times. As I said, you can also make him a very much a combat beast as well. You can give him those monstrous rending claws, which are a super cheap and cheerful way to run him. They're going to give you the ability to re-roll those wounds, and it's very difficult to get your Hive Tyrant to a high strength. That's one of his kind of drawbacks, so having the ability to re-roll those wounds is super handy. He always gets a little bit stuck because he doesn't have very many attacks, but you know, toxin sacs, adrenal glands to make him even more effective and quicker. He can still be very, very useful. So don't overlook the Tyrant. I don't think he's in the strongest place. At times he has been one of the standout units, but with a 4-up invulnerable save, toughness 7, he's not at all bad. So definitely one to consider, and I really like him on foot in this edition, but as a distraction and a real pain to get rid of. You can also consider him with wings, and he'll fit in pretty much any type of Hive fleet list. Moving on, we have the Swarmlord. Now, the Swarmlord was one of the standout units in 8th edition. Excuse me. But his points have been up and down. He's quite expensive again now. But with some of the new Forge World units, particularly the Zimakeron coming back into play, and the Swarmlord's ability to make something move again, that suddenly gives him quite a lot of play. In himself, he is quite a wrecking ball. He hits extremely hard. Again, he can chuck out some quite reliable psychic power buffs as well, or, you know, make him even better. You know, other than that, he is a Hive Tyrant, pretty much, with just the ability to be quite a lot better in combat. The ability to be strength 8 off the bounce makes him a lot more effective. He can go into harder battles in close combat and be a lot more efficient, but doesn't have very many ways to re-roll the hit rolls. So even though he hits on 2s, you need to hopefully get all those off to make sure that when it comes to the wounding stage, you can really kind of make that high strength count. But he can do mortal wounds on top of that. And yeah, he's got a 3-up invulnerable save in combat, which is handy as well. So Swarmlord, very, very good unit. I really like him. Again, he's relatively small, so he's actually quite hard to see quite a lot of the time, and he's easy to hide. So definitely one to look, and if you're playing a combat aggressive style Tyranid list, he fits in quite well. Tyranid Prime. Now, the Tyranid Prime is the cheapest of all of the HQ slots, but he quite often gets overlooked for both the Neurothrope that we'll cover in a minute, as well as the Broodlord. But he's still a useful inclusion. You can again kit him out in quite a lot of ways, but he's particularly good if you're taking warriors, because he does have that buff to warriors ballistic skill and weapon skill, which does, if you're going to take quite a lot of warriors, and they are not a bad inclusion, he's one you probably want to take in that case. But I tend to find he's not that useful, but if I really want to shave points and I want a very cheap HQ, that's where he tends to fit in. Again, he will kind of complement most Hive fleets. Not a terrible unit, but not the best. So moving on to the Termigan. Now, unfortunately, Termigan is just a little bit too many points for what she does. I loved her in the last edition. I would like to make her really resilient with chameleonic skin, stick her next to a Neurothrope, you know, make her really difficult. Obviously now you can't do that. Maximum you can go to is a -1, which means that doesn't work, that kind of tactic as much. She's just not, she just generally struggles with her points. If you're taking loads of Termigans, it tends to work out better just to have more Termigans and not her. But, you know, there's still something to be said. You could have quite a lot of fun with a couple of Termigans and loads of Termigans. You know, if your opponent hasn't got the ability to chew through them, you could have quite a lot of fun with that. She is toughness 8, which is nice with a 3-up invulnerable save. And she would be a good candidate for, you know, maybe the 5-up invulnerable save from the Blood of Baal book. But on the whole, you're probably using it for more key units. So unfortunately, she's probably not that great. I do still like her. I think, you know, you could probably use her and have some success, but she struggles a little bit. 14 wounds is nice, and a 3-up save is okay. The toughness 8 is her standout, but she can't really fight in combat very well, so she kind of falls out a little bit there. So that's the Termigan. Moving on to the Neurothrope. Now, Neurothrope is probably the standout HQ slot, which is scary, seeing it's the second cheapest. But the Neurothrope just has a 3-up invulnerable save. Again, it's a character that can't be targeted. 5 wounds is quite tasty. Having a lot of reliability with its psychic powers, because it rerolls 1s for psychic powers, is super, super strong. It has the ability to regain wounds back, which is very, very good. And it's a great candidate for some of the psychic buffs that come from the Blood of Baal, to either give it even more of an ability to be more reliable with psychic powers. You know, that works really well. And some of the key psychic powers that you want something like a Neurothrope casting it, because it just means you're super effective getting those powers off. He makes a great warlord in pretty much any army. So hard to get rid of, and yeah, they're really, really good unit. And with Zoanthropes becoming so strong, because how they effectively run the missions, the Neurothrope becomes an even more of a kind of a must. So yeah, if you haven't already, Neurothrope is a great unit to go for. So then we have old One Eye, and old One Eye, the old wrecking ball himself. He's good. He is still really, really good. The problem with old One Eye is it's kind of getting the right time to kind of throw him into combat. He's not super quick, but when he goes in, he does hit extremely hard. He will wreck things like knights, big toughness 8 stuff he has no troubles with whatsoever. Always the problem with old One Eye is that he can't really take a hit back. He suffers with that no invulnerable save, so he will go down quickly. You know, but being a character means he'll generally get where he wants to start off with, but then he can go down quickly afterwards. So you've got to be really careful with him, because he's quite fragile, which is sad. I think he should be toughness 8 personally, but you can still have a lot of fun with old One Eye, and he's not terrible. He's probably a little bit too expensive to be maybe competitive, but don't write him off. In the right combat army, you can still have fun with old One Eye. And that brings me to the end of the HQs. So for me, the standouts very much are the Broodlord, the Neurothrope, and the Hive Tyrant, as well as the Swarmlord. So you've got kind of like 4 really good choices there. I will give an honourable mention to the Neurothrope that's over in the Forge World book. We're not going to cover them in detail, but you know, if you're going to get a Forge World unit, he is one of the standout Tyranid units. Very, very effective. That -1 is super strong, and it got better. He's a real hard nut to crack, being a character with a lot of wounds, so definitely don't dismiss him. But the others are really good. I think the Broodlord is probably the weaker of the ones that we spoke about of those 4, but he can still be good in a very combat orientated list. The Hive Tyrant, again, is not at his best at the moment, but still very, very versatile, quite resilient, good unit to take in there, keeping him cheap and cheerful. You know, maybe chuck a Venom Cannon on there and you can have a lot of fun with him. So that's the HQs. We're going to go on to the troops choices, and this is a smaller section. There's not a lot really here, but we will go over it in a little bit of detail and tell you, my opinions on troops and when you're thinking about getting your softs on troops. So start off with the Tyranid Warrior. This is one of the coolest Tyranid units. Been out of favour for a long time. The Blood of Baal book gave them a lot of play. Unfortunately, they're probably still kind of on the fringe of being a very competitive unit and being a kind of okay unit. They still suffer with only being toughness 4 and only having a 4-up save. They're the kind of the struggles with them a little bit. You've got ways to make them obviously ignore -1 and 2 AP with the buffs from Blood of Baal, ways to give them better cover save, again from the Blood of Baal. And you've got stratagems to make them reduce damage, which is nice, and it's nice that they've got three wounds, nice that they're fearless, you know, so they're okay. You can put a lot of buffs on them, you can make them fairly resilient, you know, you chuck catalyst on them as well to make them have that 5-up feel no pain, and they're not the easiest unit to get rid of. At shooting and at combat they're okay. They're not going to blow the world away, but they're okay in both categories. And with the Hive, the Tyranid Prime, they can be okay. They really can be okay. So I like Tyranid Warriors. They can be quite good at controlling the centre. They're quite a good unit and one definitely to consider in your armies. If you've got enough, if you're going back to the kind of the cap strategy, if you've got enough other things doing other jobs, these can provide that control role quite well. Moving on to Gene Stealers. Now, unfortunately, Gene Stealers are probably one of the biggest casualties of 9th edition. They were very, very strong in 8th edition, very, very strong. But with the core rules changing and the way that, you know, you can't multi-charge things as effectively, as well as you can break away from combat easier, there's lots of ways that the Tyranid Gene Stealers come a lot more unstuck than they used to. Also, points-wise, they can do very well when they hit something, but again, if they can't get away and they can't hide, they die, and those points in the new point system can hurt you quite a lot. So I think there's still something to be said about little units of Gene Stealers. They still can be quite effective, and if you're hit by a big unit of Gene Stealers, they're still going to really hurt. So I wouldn't completely write them off, but they're definitely not as strong as they used to be. So still a good unit, still like them, still fun to use, and work well in a combat army, but maybe not as strong a choice as they used to be. So then we've got Termigans, and we also have Hormagaunts. Termigans are pretty much the lifeblood of your troops choices. Just a really cheap and cheerful unit that can do a lot. So it'll obviously hold space. It will also provide a great screen. It's quite easy to make these fearless. So you can run them in big blobs or you can run them in little blobs. They will do quite a lot for you. Obviously they're rubbish as far as, you know, they don't hit well, they don't do anything particularly well, but they will hold you space on the board, and points wise they're okay. So it's still going to be a really useful introduction into your list. You can play lots and lots of these and play a very swarmy army, and it can work quite well and quite effective, so I wouldn't write that off. You can also make these guys shoot a little bit better, having lots and lots of them. Yeah, they're a really good unit for what they do. They're not going to set the world on fire, but enough of these are going to be a real pain. And as long as the rest of your army gives you balance and gives you the ability to do what you need to, these guys provide a very, very useful role. So they're still a really, really strong unit, you know, as far as where they fit in the Tyranid army. Hormagaunts, however, are in a rough place. They don't particularly hit very hard. They're too expensive for what they actually add to you. They've got the ability to be that little bit quicker, and they can kind of wrap round. They've got some shenanigans in combat, and they look cool. They are your little stabby bugs that kind of I think we all want to run, but ultimately the Termigans are just much better, and that speed bonus from the Hormagaunts I don't think is enough to kind of to give you that extra points you have to pay for them. So I think the Hormagaunts I struggle with taking them, and they very rarely ever make it into my list. I'm sure there's play for them, so I wouldn't write them off completely, as I wouldn't write any unit off completely, but I don't love them that much. Then we have the Rippers. Now, Rippers are probably my favourite of the troops choice. I love Rippers. I love the flexibility of the fact that they can deep strike for free, and they have a relatively small footprint. So I find them really, really good at kind of jumping in and kind of either like clustering around an objective, you know, or just generally being a nuisance. And they can't score a lot of the secondaries anymore because of them being swarm, which is a bit of a shame. I think that's a problem, which generally means that you probably don't want them to be your only troops choice these days, whereas you maybe would get away with that before. But I think they're really, really good. I think they've got a place in almost every list. They do give you a lot of tactical flexibility, and actually when you look at their points per wound, they do stand up very favourably against the Termigans 100%. So I wouldn't write them off, and I really quite like them. And that brings me to the end of the troops choices. So quite a whistle stop tour of both HQs and troops. But if you're a new player or you're kind of coming back to the army, it gives you a rough idea of kind of how these guys fit into 9th edition. What I would say is kind of, you know, maybe the more go-tos and what kind of fits in what style. So hopefully that's helpful. If it is, please do let me know. If you have any questions, I'm going to do a Q&A this Friday, and I'm going to probably do them for the foreseeable future, while I've got questions, that is, because at the moment we can't do battle reports but at the end of the week because of lockdown. So we are going to do some fun stuff in our latter week slot. So I'm going to do a Q&A. So if you have got any questions, chuck them in there. I will probably just acknowledge your comment and I'll probably answer it in the Q&A on Friday. But yeah, but hopefully you've enjoyed that. I'll come back with the next couple of categories in the next video. And until then, I'll see you soon, guys. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.